Hello there, my name's Card. I'm a long-time progressive community activist and organizer. And today, I just wanted to briefly talk about how we think of nominally left-wing people who end up highly placed within structures of power. Specifically, I'd like to take a moment to talk about the late US Supreme Court Justice, Ruth Bader Ginsberg, and how she was never actually that great. Firstly, it isn't just a case of her mishandling things in her latter years on the court. From the outset of her judicial career, even prior to becoming a rising star in the field of law, she was eager to put her name to some truly awful things. I don't necessarily want to get bogged down in simply reading off the names of cases she made regrettable rulings in, but in short, most of her time on the federal judiciary might as well have just been railing against environmental protections and Native American land rights with extreme prejudice. Some of her language surrounding issues of indigenous sovereignty is among the harshest entered into the record in modern times. See 2005's City of Sherrill v. Oneida Indian Nation of New York, where Ginsberg explicitly approves of the dispossession of native lands as a long-standing practice. That's almost comically disgusting, but that same year, in Kelo v. the City of New London, Ginsberg happily provided the majority vote necessary to affirm that property could be seized under eminent domain on behalf of private developers. Furthermore, a lot of her legal wording in 2003's Grutter v. Boilinger is being used as an argument, if not outright precedence, in the campaign to overturn universities' affirmative actions admissions programs right now. And that's not even getting into how seemingly averse she was to ever personally employing people of color, something which was even pointed out during her Supreme Court confirmation hearings. Eagle-eyed commentators again pointed out that hundreds of clerks, secretaries, and assistants of hers from over the years who turned up at her funeral in 2020, among them maybe one was African American. It's just something to ponder. In general, Ginsberg's Supreme Court career went unexamined for 20 years because all her assents only ever really brutalized people who you wouldn't hear the perspective of anywhere near mainstream media outlets. And she certainly didn't do anything to rock the boat when it came to the interests of the real upper echelons of capital. It wasn't until much more relatively recently that Ginsberg ever got any pushback, and that was mainly just because, at least by the start of the first Obama administration, she was noticeably in physical and cognitive decline. As soon as she started becoming the subject of, not even overt criticism of her positions, but just very valid concerns about her capacity to keep working, is when you start to get this reaction of tepid liberals who idolize her and ended up turning Ginsberg into this avatar of supposed feminist empowerment just because she's a woman in such a high position. While now, thankfully, it seems a few people in the liberal centre-left have cottoned onto the fact that her actual career leaves a lot to be desired, there's still far too many people out there who insist she was a force for good, even in her final years of service. Of course, the most salient example of how Ginsberg embodied attitudes which slowed social progress lie in just how long she stuck around. I think it's entirely fair to say that by insisting on remaining on the bench, even as her health markedly faded, Ginsberg completely, willingly, passed on a chance to be succeeded by anyone remotely to the left of centre. Had Ginsberg stepped down gracefully and allowed even any other generic Democrat appointee to take up her position, then she wouldn't have been replaced by a hard right-wing ideologue under GOP leadership. I don't think any American progressives ought to be big fans of the Democrat Party, but that would at least have been a significantly better option than what ended up happening. Of course, as soon as there was a conservative majority on the court, They just started the blatant partisan rolling back of legal protections for everything they don't like, most notably access to abortion. Obviously, I think you should viscerally hate all those conservative justices, and the very idea of having this legal body of 9 people, unelected no less, telling 330 million others what to do. But an amount of what has happened due to the US Supreme Court in recent years does, without a doubt, fall squarely on Ruth Bader Ginsburg's shoulders too. And while today I've been talking specifically and pointedly about this one woman, similar criticisms really could be levied at just about every other geriatric bureaucrat and lawmaker out there. The fact that people in such a position are so often unwilling to let go and step down pragmatically is really only scratching the surface of the problem. Even under the best circumstances, you shouldn't look up to institutional power. In the case of something like the US Supreme Court, the fact that Ginsberg or any of the ostensibly liberal judges occasionally held back the desires of the more right-wing justices is not something to be applauded. It's symptomatic of how backwards the whole judicial system in the US is. Unfortunately, there isn't much of an actionable prescription in just pointing that out, and merely having an opinion is not organizing to fix something. But at the very least, people like Ruth Bader Ginsburg should not be made into idols. Anyone who considers themselves meaningfully left-wing should hate her and anyone like her, and anyone who wants to emulate her. Quite frankly, if you're inspired by her, you're probably on your way to being as bad. It's just something I wanted to express. Once again, my name's Card. Thank you for listening. Goodbye, and have a lovely day.